Lisa, I am so excited that you're here with me and chatting about women in sports and kind of getting your foot in the door with getting into the business side of women's sports. So we've got Lisa Figgenbob with us today. I'm so excited that you're here, and I'd love to talk about your journey from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast, and now you're back in the Northeast a little bit. So thanks for being with us, and we appreciate the time.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me. I've been following what you've been doing and just tremendous what you've built and the impact. So I'm honored to chat today.
Appreciate that, Lisa. So let's start with you in college, what you studied, where your mind was when you were trying to get into the, learning about the next step in your career. You went to Springfield. Can you talk about your college career, please?
Oh, yeah. You're taking me back. You're taking me back. So I went to Springfield College. For those of you who don't know, it's a small 3,000 person school in Massachusetts. And I, like many young college students, had no idea what I wanted to do at the time. But I figured, you know what? I love playing sports. So why not go into sports management? The irony was I did not have the GPA to get into sports management. I had a 2.9 and you needed a 3.0. That was like devastating for me, honestly. And so I went into recreation management. But I tell that story because all these years later, I'm now on the board of the sports management program at Springfield College. And I like to remind people, that while these things seem like devastating defeats at the time, they matter very little in the scheme of things and in life. I have found a way to be successful without having been accepted into that sports management program. So, anyway, story I always like to share. But for me, I had to do a 480-hour unpaid internship. I hope those are illegal these days, Alice. I don't know. And so I did that with the Excel Center in Hartford, and I fell in love with the experience. I fell in love with sports and entertainment and kind of just the ability to provide once in a lifetime experiences to people. And I looked around and there wasn't a lot of people who looked like me, which made it even cooler. So I, at the age of, I don't know, 20 or something, decided this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
I mean, that's amazing for you to have that recognition going into some of those experiences, saying, okay, I want to double down on this idea. I went to a school that didn't have sports management, so wasn't even aware of the opportunities. I ended up doing my master's in business and sport management, but I wish I early on, being an athlete myself and breathing that when I was younger, I wish I saw those opportunities when I was a little bit, smaller coming up through it. Okay, so you go to the Excel Center, you enjoy that experience. What's the next step?
Yeah. So then I worked my way up. I was very proactive, which I always recommend people do. These jobs aren't going to come flying at you. You've got to be proactive and ask and knock down those doors. So I got promoted a few times. I started as a sales coordinator, and over the span of about 5-6 years, was running a small department. So I was a senior manager of ticketing, and we were doing UConn basketball, minor league hockey, and arena shows. A lot of circus and Disney. I actually have a UConn ring from 2010. Might be the only ring I get, given how my current career has been tracking in pro sports, but we'll see. And so 26 years old, running the group, grew up in Connecticut. My family was there. I thought this was it. My life is made. And then just like life, boom. AEG, who I was working for, who oversaw the venue, to everyone's surprise, lost the bid when their contract was up, and a group called Global Spectrum comes in. Long story short, I was sent on my way, right? New group coming in. I had to figure something else out. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It pushed me out of my comfort zone all the way out to California, across the country. It pushed me into big four sports, right? So NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL. And, it was scary at the time, and I still look back. But that first year was hard. I was homesick. My resume read I was far more qualified for the role I had taken than I was. But I look back, and that was a really pivotal moment in my life. I proved to myself, both personally and professionally, that I can friggin' do it. But I like to share the vulnerable moments of that story too, because it's not easy, right? And a lot of times you do have to move around, especially in the industry I'm in. And that can be challenging, but it's now since gotten easier every time. So, found my way out to California. At the time, I was our senior manager of group ticket sales for the Sacramento Kings. Again, when I was there, they didn't make the playoffs once. And then I ended up working my way up at the Kings as well, and I can talk about that a little bit if you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, how did you first get your foot in the door? You know, you go from all the way from the East Coast
Yeah.
literally to the West Coast as far as you can possibly go. So, how did you get your foot in the door?
Yeah. Yeah, teamwork online is a really good resource, and things have changed a little bit, but I still use them a lot. We here at the Flyers still utilize them too. So I was able to find the role, dust my resume up to look the best it could. And again, I both submitted on teamwork, and then I really tried through my network to make some connections of does anyone I know anyone there at the Kings, right? And I was able to make a few connections and really make some inroads in there to make sure I got that interview. And I prepped like crazy for that interview. And I must have done okay because they offered me that job. The joke is I hold the record. I think it was in like 48 hours or something. It was fast. And you know, you know.
So, prepping for that interview, I mean, what advice do you have? What are the things you were thinking about,
Yeah.
and how did you approach that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, like even in my role today, I've been on both sides of this, but I do a lot of interviewing, and it's tough, right? I mean, you have to be prepared. um Two non-negotiables for me are you have to have questions at the end of the interview. If you do not, I personally won't hire you, and a lot of other people may not as well. And I say that because the questions you're asking are, one, showing that you prepared for this, but two, really showing your understanding of this function, of this role, and your ability to come in to do that. So have really thoughtful and good questions, and follow up thank you emails or old school snail mail, and not just a canned, copy and paste. You've got to find something that stuck out in that interview, whether it was something you connected on personally or you're really excited about in the job. And you have to call that out because at the end of the day, if you don't stand out, at the end, a lot of times there's a lot of people, right, in a similar bucket. All right, we've got 10 people, give or take here, and there's just one little thing that's going to make the difference. And you never know what that's going to be. So do your homework. Um, Also, on the adverse, I would say for your own good, do the homework on the leader you're going to come work for, right? I mean, across all industries, you see it. There's good leaders, there's bad leaders. Everyone likes to talk the talk of, we're diverse. Okay, well, if you go on their LinkedIn or you go on their website, are there any people who are diverse in high powered roles? If there's not, they're probably not as diverse as they're saying. We grow people, we promote people. Okay. Have you checked on LinkedIn and seen that anybody has tangibly grown, right? So on both sides, prepare to get the job, but just know like you're interviewing them too. And a lot of times if you can go in with that confidence and swagger, um, that's really helpful in how you're going to come across in this. But don't ever just take a role. Like do your homework, use your network, figure out the good, the bad, and the ugly of every organization, and figure out like, are these the people who I want to be with, who are going to help grow my career?
Hmm. You said write a thank you note. I can't. As when I was at Nichols College, I was a professor of sport management, doing all the internships, and I'm like, guys, all you have to do is thank them. Make sure that you're expressing your gratitude for someone that's taking the time out of their day to potentially bring you on board. Small
Right?
things go a long way. And it's
Completely
so you
agree.
also called out diversity, which I think is super important as we're looking, as females going into the industry. Not a ton of diversity, I would say, in sports right now, although that's hopefully changing. You've done a lot to empower some of the groups that you've been in. So can you talk about like what specifically you did at some of the organizations to look at diversity, look inward a little bit, and see how that you guys can improve that aspect of your business?
Yeah, yeah. And look, we've made a lot of strides for sure. Unfortunately, I think the pandemic set us back a lot, right? The sports and entertainment industry, especially, was really impacted. And you look at the data; it was disproportionately impacted, especially to women, especially if they had children, right? So that was a little bit of a bummer, but it's such a hot topic now. And one of the things that I think is really important for this audience to understand too is sometimes we can kind of become a little divisive of like us versus them, women versus men. There have been so many men along my way who are tremendous allies and are just as supportive of bringing in diversity and helping people like me grow. And so I think that's a really important part of the conversation to make sure we're all working together towards a common need. So, but some of the things tangibly, I mean, when I was at the Kings, I started a women in sports group, which was great, right? I mean, it was a group of women across various departments coming together and really touching on some hot topics, right down to, I mean, this was an interesting one. We did a training with all of the male staff at the Kings on if you see an employee, largely female, being harassed on a game day, say by a fan who's maybe had a little bit too much to drink, what can you do to support in that situation, right? And what we ended up finding out was most of the men were like, "Oh, I see this all the time, and I just don't know how to help. Like, I'm afraid if I jump in, the woman will feel like I don't think she's got it. But if I don't, like, how am I helping her?" So it was so cool. It just opened up this conversation that really got us in a good place. So again, I think working alongside the men in this industry is so important, but having those platforms to have real honest conversation about what's happening, how can we address it, where do we go from here is super important. And then I think it's taking the time to have conversations with folks like you in podcasts, or go speak to women's groups in market, because at the end of the day, representation is key. Like when I was little, I didn't see women on any of these platforms, let alone women like myself who identify with the LGBTQ community. Like it just didn't exist, right? I would have loved to have seen that. So no matter how busy I am, and there are weeks where it's 60 hours, let me tell you, that's no joke. I'll always make 15 minutes, whether it's someone who reaches out on LinkedIn or someone in market who wants to grab a coffee. I will always do that, and hopefully I always continue to find the time. But yeah, I mean, I think the women's groups, I think being very thoughtful and working with HR departments on how we're approaching interview processes and just making sure we're at least casting a wide net and have diversity in the mix. And then recruiting people is one thing, but retaining them is another. And if people of any minority group are going to feel comfortable and engage in a culture, that takes work. It doesn't naturally happen. There's been many times I'm the only woman in the room, and look, it hasn't been a cakewalk, right? And again, I've had many allies, both male and female, along the way. I've also had really challenging circumstances, and I've had days where I'm crying or I'm reaching out to the only other woman in the organization with me, going like, I need, like, are we crazy? Like, this is hard. But leaning on other women supporting women, nothing drives me more crazy than women who are not supporting each other. I don't care what your differences are, figure it the hell out, because we have enough battles to fight. Um, anyways, I could go on forever. I just rambled off a bunch of things there, but that's kind of my general approach.
No, and I think like the way that you're so authentic and outright about, talking about these challenges, and then just saying, hey, we just need more conversation around the topic so that people feel comfortable enough to have those other conversations, is just half the battle. Um, I just love your approach to it, because you're just like, let's talk about it. Let's hire women. Let's talk about the challenges. Yeah. So you work your way up at the Sacramento Kings, before taking a job in Dallas. So do you want to talk about that? How you were able to climb the ladder a little bit? Who helped you out? How did that? Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd that look like?
Yeah. And again, I was always really proactive every step of the way, like working with my boss of, okay, how do I take on more? What meetings can I be a part of? Who do you think it's important that I develop a relationship with that's going to have like a seat at the table when promotion right? So this never just came at me. It was a very tactical approach. And again, I was lucky to have a male boss at the time who was so supportive of that. So I originally came in overseeing groups, and then I absorbed what we call inside sales, which, by the way, quick plug, is a entry level sales group, largely made up of boys and girls right out of college who come in and get trained to sell. That's also a group I oversee here today, and so any interest, would love to connect. And then from there, I ended up taking on a premium piece of the business, which is suites and things of that nature, for those who don't know. But again, every step of the way, I felt like I was in over my head at every turn. But the way I'm wired, it's like a year of doing this. All right, I got it down. What's my next challenge? And I both love and hate myself for it, because I wish I could just kind of chill, enjoy life, and not be constantly taking on all of these challenges, but it's the way I'm wired, and I love what I do so much, and I love who I do it with. So, um, just kept taking on. So my last role with the Kings was vice president of groups, premium hospitality, Chicana Suites, and then event sales. So I started a event program. So on dark days when there wasn't any Kings games and there wasn't any concerts, we were renting the building out to Dutch brothers who would spend a pretty penny to do a 10,000 person team building thing. And so that was a new kind of fun, exciting thing I could take on. So um yeah, I was out there for like 8.5 years, which was crazy. That was never the plan. And then the pandemic hit, and like many others, I did a lot of soul searching, right? Like, what matters? Um, what am I doing? What makes me happy? And I realized that I really wanted to get back closer to the East Coast, towards family. And so when I figured that out, I knew that at some point I'd be leaving the King soon. And it was so hard for me to leave over the years. And I passed up some really good opportunities because I really consider my staff family. And it was so hard for me to leave that group. But the both blessing and disguise of the pandemic, our owner didn't have a B next to his dollar sign. So unfortunately, we had to furlough and then ultimately lay off a lot of people. So the way I looked at it was, all right, if I have to do this anyways and I'm going to have to rebuild my staff, my family, now's the time probably to go. Now's the time to go and do this somewhere else. And so to your point, that took me to Texas, and I was and still am very passionate about women's sports. In fact, that's something as Comcast Spectacor that owns the Flyers is also very passionate about here in Philadelphia. Um, so got to Texas with the Dallas Wings, and then also the lacrosse team, the Panther City Lacrosse, which was a new team launching, another big challenge, and was overseeing different pieces of the business too, which is important to me. I hope to be a team president someday. So I had to figure out, how do I get myself just out of the ticketing niche and really take on more pieces. So I oversaw partnerships and marketing and data and analytics. I won't bore you with it. And look, I had a great year there. It was a small operation. The resources that go into women's sports versus like the big four, there's still a massive discrepancy, although you're seeing that investment really tick up, which is exciting to see across NWSL and WNBA in particular. And then I got, the offer for the role I'm in now. And so it was really hard to pass up. And so hopefully someday I can, from my chair, oversee both big four, which right now is Flyers and 76ers for us. And then also oversee or have some part in a women's sports team, because that will continue to be a passion of mine.
I think there's so much to unpack about what you just said. So you came over from the NBA, went into a women's WNBA market. What were the things that you took from the NBA that you were able to hopefully translate? These are the the learned experiences that I had over here that you were able to pull to the WNBA, if any?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. The demand situation was a little different, so I had to think strategically there, right? Pricing was different, things like that, but a lot of it is pretty transferable, and I think that's important to note as people get into their careers and navigate through them. Um, a lot of skill sets are transferable. A leader is a leader, a strategist is a strategist, and in my case, someone who can sell is someone who can sell, and that is transferable from NBA WNBA. So there was definitely some things I could pull over. And then it was a real challenge to have to look at not only a different market, right? Sacramento, Texas, a completely different product, but completely different resources too. And that was like, how do I had a 51st person sales staff in Sacramento. Now I have a 10-person sales staff. So how do I adjust in my approach, to figure out how to maximize that? So definitely a lot of transferable, but a lot of new stuff too. And it was just, but I knew what I was going into, and I wanted that challenge. And again, you see WNBA and NWSL in particular, a lot of investment into those groups, both from staff. You see a lot of partners, which is really big. The sponsorship dollars invested into these franchises is what allows for the business operation side to continue to invest in a meaningful way in the back end, right? Because at the end of the day, if the business economics don't map out, right? And this is all how we're going to start to get players paid more outside of all these crazy contracts they're getting with, Gatorade and Nike, and it's great. It's great to see. Sorry, I've definitely veered off the question at this point, but it just makes me excited. We're going in a good
We hope
direction.
so, right? We hope it's not a flash in the pan. We think this is
Yeah.
a long-term thing here. So I completely agree. When you came into Dallas, obviously it's a smaller staff there. Was there more of a willingness to hire women, did you find, in the W, or did it not matter?
I think there's the willingness everywhere. There was more women raising their hands to come
Hmm.
work in women's sports, which I think is beautiful, and I think as you watch it now, I think it's like Angel City FC is a really great example in the NWSL, is either all or predominantly women run. And that's cool too, right? To see, I'll always have a bias towards like women just being a superior being and, solving the world's problems. But yeah, it wasn't that there was a larger desire to hire women. It was that women were coming through more. And I'll give you an example. Like here at the Flyers and Sixers, when we post a role for an entry level sales rep, let's say 100 resumes come through, less than 10 of those resumes will be women,
Wow.
right? So from a ratio perspective, like
Yeah.
that ain't great, right? And so like I love what you're doing. I love what people are continuing to do in market. Like we have to, as women who are passionate about sports and entertainment, we have to get out there and we have to talk about it and we have to make it known from, call it even high school through college, that this is a viable career path, right? And not only can you be an entry level sales rep, you can be a senior vice president of ticketing someday, right? And there's no better time, I promise you, than right now with the attention to diversity and the proof that diverse candidates are coming in and killing it to get in at an entry level and really surround yourself by the right people and grow. So there's definitely that willingness, at least in the franchises I've worked for. There's still some who I think struggle across the board. And look, that starts with ownership and that starts with leadership on down. They'll figure it out someday.
So you obviously you move over to Philly. You've taken a jump across the country again. What's your role been like now, and are you enjoying it? What are the things that you take away from it? And you already said, one day you want to be a president, which I love. You're already setting the next stage for yourself. Hopefully. So let's start. Like, what's your job like now? Now, take us through a day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been here just about 2 years, which is like crazy to me how fast this flew by. So again, right now I'm our senior vice president of ticketing, which means I oversee a small army of sales and service reps, probably about 50, right? I've got some VPs and directors beneath me who are fantastic, who really drive forward the day to day there. Then I also oversee our ticket operations group, right? So Ticketmaster, I'm sure people are familiar with. They're doing the back of the house, getting all the events set up logistically. And then the third piece of the business I oversee is what's called our events and hospitality group. Lean and mean and just kill it. So we're doing everything from taking our highest dollar corporate partners to the Bahamas, to a season ticket member meet the team event, to a really turnkey sales event at one of our games to come out and hopefully buy some season tickets. So I am so blessed with the group I have. A lot of my day and really the function of my role comes down to two things. It's strategy and it's staff. It's the people. And I put this one first. Like the people are everything. I'm a people first leader and I mean it. I probably fight and support my people a little harder than maybe I should sometimes, but that doesn't mean I'm not challenging them. That doesn't mean I'm not helping them grow. But at the end of the day, those conversations, because we've developed such a good relationship and because they know my intention is pure and to help them grow, they're free flowing and they're great. And guess what? They're giving me feedback all the time too. I've probably learned more from them than they have from me. That's a fact. But anyways, my day to day is a lot on the strategy side. I'll give you an example. This last week at the Flyers, actually today, our schedule just got released. Okay, so there's a lot that goes into that. There's all right, when are we going on sale with single game tickets? What's the pricing going to be? What's the inventory makeup? How many seats do we hold for groups? How many seats do we have for season ticket members and singles? What are our theme nights, right? What are those nights that we can put out there that'll attract your casual fan who maybe doesn't like hockey at all, but they'll come out because it's, Boy Scout night, or they'll come out because it's Marvel night. So a lot of moving pieces with that alone. And then the other thing that happened this week is we had signed a player with the last name Michkov. He's going to be a game changer for this organization. He was supposed to come over in 3 years. We got him a year early. Super exciting. But how do you quickly pull together that plan from marketing to letting the market know he's here, whether that's billboards or emails or our social, obviously huge today, to how do we galvanize the sales staff to get the market excited and convert them into paying customers or buying jerseys. So every day looks different, right? We've got a lot of exciting news on the Sixers front. How do we capitalize on that? Every day looks and feels different, which is what keeps this exciting. But there are so many moving pieces in sports that people don't understand. Working in sports is sexy. It is a job. It is a grind at the end of the day also. And I like to remind people of that. But when you collaborate and you work together with people the way we do here, because in sports, you will literally see these people more than your family. I mean that very seriously. We have fun doing it and we do a really good job.
Yeah, I mean, you can feel it. You breathe it. You talk about your people, and it does feel like it's family for you. So, and I think that that's exactly why you have found yourself in many leadership positions throughout this. I mean, I'm sure your staff would talk very highly of you, and I think that right there is the success for you. Um, so what I love that you're talking about is like you're not just talking about sports, but you're also talking about these sport adjacent businesses. So you're talking about like Ticketmaster and the other little opportunities that women or young girls can start looking into. Oh, maybe it's not being working at the Celtics, but it's working with these sport adjacent businesses. It sounds like you guys work with a ton of them, sponsorship and facility. So yeah, what
Yeah.
is that? What does that look like for you guys?
I love that. I love that you brought that up because, everyone knows sports has marketing and sales to some extent, but I think what people miss is even within the confines of the team, there's HR like everywhere else, right? There's finance. There's what we call strategy and analytics. So there's all of these different pieces just on the team side itself. Then, to your point, you get into all of the various ticketing systems, right? There's SeatGeek, there's Ticketmaster, there's Access that are all working with a number of different teams. There's a lot of sales and service technology tools that are becoming, especially in 2024. You can see this trend, but so there's a number of vendors that are trying to get into sports, work with different sports teams. So that's another whole cool piece of the business, right? Then to your point, you have people on the other side who are working for, let's say, Coke, for example, and they're responsible for placing sponsorship dollars and making the decision on where those dollars go. Are we going to go with the sports team? Are we going over here? And so that's another interesting way in. There's also in most venues the concert piece of the business too, which opens up a whole nother world, right? And we're one of the third or fourth busiest venues in the country, give or take, on the year, which is amazing to see. There's our food and beverage provider, Aramark, right? So if you like that piece of the industry, but you want to stay close to sports, that's also an option. So to your point, there's so many different ways if you're passionate about sports and entertainment that you can touch and feel the business. And again, nothing's permanent. People have gone from the F&B side over to sales, from sales over to you're always in control of your journey. And the more you can learn about the business as a whole, merchandise. Sorry, that's another one because I'm not fashionable, but for people who are, that's a cool piece of the business, right? Connecting the dots between your passion of fashion, rhymes, and the sports and entertainment world, right? So you bring up a good point. There's so many ways you get involved, especially if you're like me and a washed up athlete who there's no chance I'm going to play on the court or the ice or anything like that. You made it farther than I did, but
No, I mean you've seen the business from so many different angles, which I think you are clearly just a wealth of knowledge, and you clearly have seen it from you're hiring entry level people, even interns, and then you see it all the way up to the C-suite executive level. What are those differentiating factors for those that make it and those that don't, and those become successful in the business?
yeah. Listen, it's a great question. Like attitude is everything, right? I don't care how good you are, how much you sell, how great. If you don't have the right attitude and can therefore kind of collaborate and create a good culture, you ain't gonna make it. You ain't gonna make it. Anticipation is another one that I think is really key that a lot of people forget. Like I'm constantly anticipating. All right, what is my boss going to need that he doesn't know he needs yet? What problem is going to come about that I can figure out and get ahead of before it becomes a problem, right? And those are just two examples. But the more you can problem solve and strategically think, the more that will set you apart, right? And look, nothing will beat straight hard work and grit, right? If no one can outwork you, um, you'll be in a good spot. And the last one I always say, and like I always struggled with this, and I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or whatever. I used to be so afraid to ask for
Mm.
help, and like sometimes I even still am, but I've largely gotten over that as I feel like I've kind of earned my credibility. But back in the day, back at the Sacramento Kings, I remember I was putting this report together in Excel, and it would take me 2 hours because I was inputting everything. And a year later, I finally asked a guy in our analytics department for some help, and he did what I was doing in 2 minutes. I can't even make this shit up. And I don't know if I was more thrilled at that point or more livid, like because I had figured out that, like, all because I wouldn't ask someone for help. So that's my story. That is one example. There are many more. Asking for help can make you seem very emotionally intelligent, very secure, and it's never a bad thing. I mean, don't go ask a bunch of ridiculous questions 7 times a day, but like, don't be afraid to ask for help. Um, Everybody likes to be asked for help. In fact, one of the things that I do is once a week, I have 15 minutes blocked out on my calendar, and it says, go ask someone for help. Whether I need the help or not, it's a great self-esteem booster, and it makes the person on the other side feel really good. So I try, some weeks I miss, but I try once a week to go ask somebody for help.
I absolutely love that. I think that's such a smart way to go about it. And I think you're right. It does kind of build people up around you where they're like, oh, they're asking for my opinion, my help here. It kind of builds you
Exactly.
up. Kind of along the same vein, and I've been asking this question: failures within your career. I think it's so challenging to talk about sometimes, but it's so important for people to relate to each other on some of these. So, have you had failures? I'm sure we all have. So, have you had failures that you're willing to talk about through your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's been times where someone was promoted over me, and I thought my world was going to end. In fact, it did the complete opposite. It made me do some real introspection and realize, you know what? That person is better than me. Probably should have been promoted over me, and then drove me to work harder and be that much better, right? But at the time, yeah, that was awful, right? I can't think of any like exact examples, but I say to my team all the time, if we're not failing, then we're not pushing the envelope hard enough. So certainly trying things and failing is like, if you're not doing that, then you're playing it way too safe. And again, I wish I could think of an example here, but listen, I've missed goals, right? In sales, it's pretty tangible, right? You're either hitting things or you're not. Um, Largely, I've knocked down some huge numbers, and I'm proud of that, and that's to credit the people who I work with, who are tremendous. But when you miss one here or there, you feel the weight of the world, right? Like it's crashing down on you. But you're at a crossroads then when you fail, right? You can either commiserate, blame everyone else, and have a shitty attitude, which like I've teetered that. I've been there. It's human nature. Or you can look at it as an opportunity. Say, you know what? I'm never gonna let this happen again. I'm gonna learn from this, and I'm going to try to have a good attitude about this because look, there's other people involved in this failure. There's people underneath me. There's people all looking at me. And if I can have a positive outlook on it and I can grab them along with me, like that's where true leadership comes from, right? It's easy to be a good leader when everything's going well, right? You know, when it's not, your true character as a leader comes out when things aren't going well. And I promise you, and especially those of you who've played sports and lost major games or got cut from this team, you get it because you already inherently have it in you. You've got that competitive edge, you give a shit, but you've got to put it in perspective too. And also at the end of the day, it's like, look, I'm alive and healthy. I missed a
Mm,
goal. Life will go on.
yeah.
Life will
Yeah,
go
I mean, I love that you're pulling in some of the relatability factor with sports. Like being an athlete and learning how to fail through athletics has been so impactful on my life, and being able to take those licks and move forward from it and learn from it. And learn with a team. That's part of it too. So yeah, I mean, I think that's so important. I,
Mhm.
you know, as I look at this conversation, it's like I think you have so much a wealth of knowledge for those coming into the business, especially, and what you could kind of provide for them. So, what are those just like any type of advice that you can give to a college female that's coming up through a sport
Mhm.
management group right now, that's looking to get their foot in the door, that maybe hasn't figured out what exactly their route is? Most of the college students that I'm talking to right now are like, yeah, I like marketing, yeah, I like operations. They have no idea though. And I think part of it is just opening their
Mhm.
mind to what there is out there. But what kind of advice do you have for those women?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Look, you've got to be proactive, right? LinkedIn's a beautiful thing these days. One, make sure your page matches how you want your brand portrayed, right? We'll put a pin like just make sure because a lot of people are looking at, but reach out to people, right? Reach out to the me's of the world, reach out to other people at sports. Again, the worst they can say is no or just not respond to you, but you will get people who will have a conversation with you. But when you do that, go into that conversation with purpose and an objective. Otherwise, you have spent 30 minutes making a good new friend you'll never talk to again. What the hell's the point of that, right? Like, you've got to go in, say, okay, my goal in this conversation is to make sure that Lisa Fingenbaum knows who I am, knows what I want to do, and most importantly, knows how she can help me, right? Be very, very specific. And in some of those, it's just figuring out the good, the bad, and the ugly. I always say, like, you can figure out kind of the sexy parts of a role just because and through observation. Figure out what the worst part of somebody's job is every day and ask yourself, can I do that? Do I want to do that? Right. So yeah, look, just being proactive in the industry, especially in sports entertainment. It is a small industry, um, but people talk. So your brand is everything. Start those conversations. Don't be afraid to ask and cast a wide net, and then just don't be too pigeonholed on like I've got to get into a marketing coordinator role. Guess what? You and everybody else wants to get into a marketing
Mhm.
coordinator role. I promise you. So be open, right? Sales is the most common way to get your foot in the door in sports, but not everybody is cut out for sales. Let me caution that. If you don't want to sell, it's not going to be a good fit, and that is okay. That is okay. Don't be afraid to look at minor league. That's where I started. The minor league hockey, and a lot of people they want to get right into the big four, the NBA, the NHL. Guess what? It's the most competitive market out there. So don't sleep on the experience you will get getting into a minor league team. And again, I can't. This is so important, and I can't stress enough. Do your homework on the leadership group that you are coming in to work for, and make sure it aligns with your values, and make sure that this is the group that you really think is gonna like invest in you as a human and help you grow.
So important, all of those things that you just mentioned. I think specifically, like, don't be afraid to, if you're shooting for the NBA, don't be afraid to go to the G League team. And it's like, in the line that I'm in the line of work that we're in right now, we're doing youth sports, and it's club sports, so it's so robust. It's a $1 billion industry where these kids coming up, they don't even realize, oh my god, I can make a full time career out of running a lacrosse program in my hometown and do very well. Most of the times they're doing better than they would if they went to the NBA, which is the truth. And a couple of our
Yeah.
interns, I mean, one just landed at the Clippers, one just landed a GA position in college basketball. It's just like you got to start somewhere, and don't be afraid to start kind of where you don't think is a good spot for you. It's like, okay, I was shooting for the NBA, but I landed in youth basketball. Okay, well, where's this going to go? And you kind of have to look at the industry as a whole sometimes too, and work your way back a little bit. Some of these kids don't realize, like, reverse engineer. Oh, this is where it starts. Let me get, it's just, there's so many pieces to sports right now. I'm hoping we can kind of open their eyes a little bit. My
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And listen, like, find me on LinkedIn, reach out. It's a crazy busy time, but I promise you, like, I will get back if there's anything I can help, or anywhere I can be a
you're
resource.
the absolute best. I absolutely see you will absolutely be a president of a sports team at some point in your career, and I'm sure of that. Last thing I would leave you with is where do you see women's sports specifically over the next few years? Are you excited about things in Philly? I've heard some rumblings actually, but I won't release
Mhm.
those here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I would just say again, like our leadership group is very open about the fact that they're excited about potentially exploring a women's sports team someday. I have no idea what that means or how they'll flesh out, but I love and am honored to work for a group that is even exploring and sees the value in that. Women's sports is at an all-time high, and I think you said it earlier. I don't think it'll be a moment in time. Like, this seems like it is around to stick. And so how do we as women in sports kind of continue to capitalize in this momentum? But it'll be exciting, 50 years from now, we're talking to our grandchildren or whatever. Like, we are living this moment in time. And not a lot of people are going to get to say that. So we need to enjoy the journey, set reasonable expectations about getting from A to Z, but support it, right? Put our money where our mouth is, whether it's going as a fan or, if you're overseeing the dollars of a sponsorship buy, there's no better time to invest.
Couldn't agree more. Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. You've been, a pleasure to talk to, and I'm excited to watch your career over the next few years.
Awesome. Thanks, Alice.
Thanks.
Appreciate you.